is the difference between the circumference of a knitted item and the circumference of the body part that knitted item surrounds. Some items aren't designed with positive ease, which means they are larger than the body part they surround, and some are designed with negative ease, which means the item has to stretch to fit around the body. And some are designed with no ease, which means they are knit to the actual circumference of that body part. In this video, we're going to look at several different types of basic knitted items and what the typical amount of ease would be for each of them. Understanding how ease is used in the design process can be really helpful when selecting the appropriate size to make for your next project. If you'd like to jump right to a specific point in the video, you can mouse over or tap on the video playback area of the screen to reveal the chapter titles and starting points of each section. The key measurement for hats is the circumference of the head right above the ears. So you don't include the ears, but you measure the circumference around the head right above the ears. So that's the key measurement. And then the hat is knit with 10 to 15% negative ease. So a standard adult head is about 22 inches in circumference. And so a typical hat made with stockinette fabric like this would be 19 to 20 inches in circumference. And that would fit most adults comfortably. They might have a preference for something a little snugger or something a little looser, but that would be a typical hat. An exception might be if you were knitting something in stranded colorwork. Stranded colorwork just doesn't stretch as much as regular stockinette fabric. So here I'm going to stretch some stockinette fabric. You can see how much it stretches like this. But the stranded colorwork just doesn't stretch as much. And so you have to keep that in mind when you are determining the amount of negative ease your hat might need. So rather than 10 or 15% negative ease, you may only want like 5% negative ease. You might want something that's a little bit closer to the actual size of the head, still a little bit smaller because it will stretch, but just not as small as you would knit it if it were in basic stockinette. Now that goes true for heavily cabled fabrics as well. Because of the way cables cross each other, that prevents that fabric from stretching as much widthwise as regular stockinette. And so again, if you've got a heavily cabled hat, you might want to wear something, or you might want to knit something that's closer to the size of the actual head circumference. The key measurement for mittens is the circumference of the hand all the way around right above where the thumb separates from it. Typically, mittens are going to be knit pretty close to the actual measurement of the hand, but that can differ based on a couple of different factors. One is how thin or thick the yarn is that you're using it. I have a pair of mitts here that were knit with fingering weight yarn, which is like sock yarn. And these were knit to be a little smaller in circumference than my actual hand. Now, part of what's causing this to narrow is that this is in cables, and so the purl columns are pulling things in a little bit like ribbing. What I wanted for these mitts was for them to stretch as they fit my hand. They don't fit tight at all, but they fit my hand closely and they fit around the contours of my hand. This is a very thin yarn. It's fingerless mitts. It's not meant to be a winter mitten to keep my hands warm when it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit outside. This is something that I would wear inside, maybe while I was working on the computer and I wanted to be able to type and I didn't want there to be bagging. So this is one way to approach it. This is to knit it a little bit smaller than my hand. So this is worsted weight. This is a standard yarn weight, and this is another fingerless mitt that I wanted to fit my hand. So I knit it to the size of my actual hand. And it fits comfortably. It fits my hand well, it fits comfortably. I have this nice long arm on it, and that works just great knit to my actual hand circumference. This is a real mitten. that has tops to it. And this was also knit with a worsted weight yarn. So same yarn weight as this, but a little bit bigger. So when I knit this, I wanted it a little bit bigger than my hand. I didn't want it too big because I didn't want it to be too sloppy so I couldn't wear it comfortably. And I didn't want it to be so much room that it wouldn't keep my hand warm. But I do have a little bit of ease in here. They're maybe an inch larger in circumference than my actual hand. And this one was knit with a yarn that's sort of on the edge of bulky and super bulky. And I wanted this to fit my hand, but because the yarn is so thick, I made it an inch larger in circumference so that when I actually put it on my hand, it would fit the way that some of the other ones fit when they were knit to the actual size of my hand. So when you knit with something that is quite a bit thicker, sometimes you just need more ease or not as much negative ease because the yarn is going to take up room on the inside circumference of the mitt. The key measurement for socks is one of two measurements. It's either the ankle circumference or the ball of foot circumference. So some sock patterns will use one of those measurements and one will use the other. They frequently will include a schematic that shows you what those circumferences are. The assumption typically is that those two measurements are essentially the same, which is why some patterns will use one measurement and some will use the other. So that is the key measurement. And what you're looking for in a sock is negative ease. So just like with a hat, you want 10% negative ease. But in this case, the circumference, that key circumference, is the smallest measurement that the sock tube is going to surround. So when you look at a sock going up the leg is getting larger and larger in circumference. So even though it is 10% negative ease down here at the ankle, there's going to be more and more negative ease at the top. And that tends to be okay for most people. The fabric will stretch as much as 50% at that top area. If you have a leg that gets bigger faster than that, then you might need to adjust that. But that is what that measurement is assuming, is that it's going to fit even more snugly as it goes up the leg in order to help defy gravity and prevent the sock from falling. And for the foot, you also want about 10% negative ease for the ball of foot. It's the foot is widest here at the ball, but the circumference is the smallest relative to the rest of the foot. The foot gets larger and larger in circumference as it heads toward the ankle. And again, you want something that's snugly fit so that it doesn't move around inside your shoe. So that's a different sort of fit approach than you see with other items that might have negative ease, like a mitten or a hat. Now there's a lot more to getting a really good fit in a sock. I will leave a link below. I have a tutorial on custom fitting socks that rely on far more measurements than just the ankle or just the ball of foot. But if you are using a published pattern and you want to understand what the finished measurements are based on, typically it is 10% negative ease in the ball of foot and or ankle. Now again, like with other situations where you're working with negative ease, if the stitch pattern inhibits the fabric from stretching. So if you're using stranded color work or if you're using heavily cabled fabric, you may need to knit the sock to actually fit the ankle so that there is enough stretch as it goes up here, because the fabric itself won't have as much stretch as plain stockinette, and so you just need to give it more room to begin with. So you can use those clues to help guide you. The key measurement for sweaters is typically the chest size or full bust measurement. So if we look on my little tiny mannequin here and we look to the side, you can see that this piece of orange tape is going around what's called the full bust. That's the largest part of the bust, measuring around there. And that is how you would select what size to knit. What pattern size you would knit is based on your full bust measurement and finding that full bust measurement in the pattern. If you are particularly busty though, you may find that knitting a sweater based on your full bust measurement is going to result in something that's too big everywhere else. So many women find that it's a better indicator of sweater size if they take what's called their upper bust or high bust measurement. So if you lift your arms up and you bring the measuring tape around right under your underarms all the way around, you can use that measurement to tell you what size to knit the sweater, because that's going to be more in line with your actual body frame. And then you will have to make adjustments to accommodate your bust, but the rest of the sweater is going to fit you better. So there are also going to be a huge range of differences in how much ease a sweater has based on the era in which the pattern was written. So if you're knitting from a vintage pattern, it may not fit you the way you would expect to fit today. So you need to compare what the to fit size measurement is with the finished size measurement. And if your pattern doesn't give you both of them, you might need to calculate one or the other, or at least have an idea of how you want your sweater to fit. So if you have a sweater in your wardrobe that you really like the fit of, and the yarn that was used to knit that sweater is similar to the yarn you want to use for your sweater, you can measure that one and see how, well, I really like the way this one fits, and what are the measurements of that sweater. And that can help guide you in terms of the amount of ease you might actually want in your sweater. In this video, I explain the key measurement associated with each type of knitted item and the amount of ease typically associated with that measurement. I also explained how the behavior of a stitch pattern or a significant difference in yarn weight might mean a change in the amount of ease needed. I'm going to leave a list of videos and other resources related to measurements and knitting to fit down in the video description. If you have any comments or questions about today's video, or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below, or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.